Hey, everybody, welcome to Ask a Pastor. Today's question is where do Neanderthals fit in the story of creation? If God created Adam and Eve, then how come we have all this record of evolution and peoples predating what we understand to be human beings? It goes back to a question we talked about in a previous video about whether or not it's possible for Christians to believe in evolution. And my simple answer to that was, well, yeah, it's very possible because evolution and the Bible are not incompatible, depending on how you read these stories. If you believe that Genesis has to be understood in those kind of literal terms, that God really did create the world in 6 days and there was nothing preceding the first human beings, then yeah, you'd have a real problem with the idea of Neanderthals. And I guess you'd have to do some gymnastics, and there have been some people who've worked really hard to make that work within their understanding. But as a pastor, as you know, just my perspective on this is that the Bible is not meant to be read so literally that you can't also believe that evolutionary science is valid. Whether you want to believe that Adam and Eve were themselves Neanderthals, there are some people who probably believe that, or if you want to believe that Adam and Eve were the first human beings and that were somehow God used the process of evolution to get them there, that's an option. Personally, I find it more plausible to believe that the Adam and Eve story was never meant to be purely historical in the way we understand history since the Enlightenment. What the story of Adam and Eve amounts to for us is myth. Now, be careful with that, because when I say myth, I don't just mean fiction. I don't just mean that it's made up. Myth in the ancient world was a legitimate way of talking about truth. It was to convey real truth that was grounded in history, in concrete human experience, but not in a way that necessitated the kind of linear preservationist understanding of history the way we understand it in the modern world. So for them, the idea wasn't to convey, hey, there was actually two people, Adam and Eve, they were the first human beings, there was nothing before them. That wasn't really the science. They weren't trying to teach us that kind of scientific truth. What they were trying to teach us was that human beings were created in God's image and that God breathed life into them. I don't think it's a real problem to believe that that God did that through a kind of evolutionary process where there were Neanderthals, and many of you will know a whole lot more about that kind of evolutionary history than I do. But as a pastor, I don't think you have a biblical reason to reject the idea of Neanderthals. It doesn't mean that we're not going to correct our thinking and change the way we think over the years. Of course we will. But the idea from Scripture is that God created human beings in God's own image. Wherever Neanderthals fit in the story, they're just not mentioned in Scripture. So don't stress about it. Well, I hope that helps. I hope that's a helpful perspective and not a more confusing one. But what I would tell you is believe what Scripture is actually trying to teach you. And yes, you can also believe what science is trying to teach you. They're doing something different. And so, sure, I believe there were Neanderthals before human beings. I believe in general in the evolutionary science that we've inherited. And I believe the scriptures. I believe that all of the scripture is intending to teach us real truth about who God is, who we are, and that those two perspectives are not incompatible.